fundamental or foundational change we've added or increased, improved in 4D v14 is addressing external access. Now, you all know that there's many ways to get in and out data into 4D. We've got SOAP or HTTP. We've got 4D Internet Commands. What feature is that?
Plugin.
Plugin that can import, export. And of course, SQL pass-through. But the one that seems to be core to accessing with other applications is the ODBC, the Open Database Connectivity. The reason, of course, is that it has a wide use in multiple other applications and operating systems. Since 4D11, we have included an ODBC driver for both operating systems, and in V11 and onward, we've of course let it have access to a native 4D SQL server. And ODBC, the thing that we've tried to address, we've addressed I think quite well in V14, revolves around security. So let me just walk through our current security model before V14, and we'll then look into what we've changed. In our current security model, we of course have users, and users are inside of groups, and groups are inside of schemas. And then schemas, of course, actually allow you to control which tables you can read and write, right? That's the access level that we currently have in our security model through ODBC. So is that enough, I guess is the question.
We can answer that question with a task, I think. It's an easy way to answer that question. Is table level control sufficient? So what I would like to do in my 4D system is get a list of contacts for my companies and provide that to an Excel user.
Valid?
Okay. So we have a typical 4D database. It's got a company table and a contact table. Who am I kidding? This is not a typical 4D database. This is a typical 4D database. So the first issue is I don't want an Excel user doing select star from my tables. There may be sensitive data in some of those fields that I don't want them to have access to. It's also not very convenient for the Excel user to have hundreds and hundreds of columns in their spreadsheet. So we can't do select star. So what do they have to do today? Well, they have to build a query. This means that an external user, an Excel user, has to know which fields contain the data they want, has to know which tables contain the data they want. They have to know how they are related. They have to build the join. This is a lot of information about my database that I don't want given to the outside world.
In fact, just the act of giving that knowledge to the outside world means you have to have the knowledge in more than one place. You have to have the control in more than one place. That's a replication that is just not necessary. And of course, if you've ever dealt with this before, you'll know it's kind of painful when someone else makes a mistake in your data structure and gets all confused.
Which I think another point that's interesting, aside from the security, is it's also the Excel user may not be a database developer. They may not know how to do a join. So we have an issue. We solved this in V14 with a feature called SQL Views.
Yeah.
I liked it.
Of course, this is another example of us borrowing from other places. Yeah.
So what is a SQL view in 4D? We'll look at that first. So through some code. A SQL view starts with a begin SQL statement. It's made up of two parts. No, sorry, we're in Europe. Two parts. The first part is the code to create the view. You give the view a name. You name the columns that are going to be part of the view. This is completely virtual. This has nothing to do with my 4D tables. I can call this whatever I want. The second piece is just a query. I have to tell 4D how to put data in that view. Now, first thing that's interesting, I think, about this is just some code. It's in a method. I can run that method anytime I want.
You know what? Why don't we do that? Let's go ahead and
do that?
Yeah, let's
right.
take a look at an example of doing this. So This is a Macintosh OS. This is Microsoft's Query Analyzer. You could use this to kind of take a look at your ODBC connection. So Ad's got a 4D server running as well with some data in it. And what we're going to do is we have, let's say, when we were in Las Vegas, we were at a Cosmopolitan hotel. That's a hotel that's in Las Vegas, Nevada. And let's say they were a client of ours, and we wanted to give them contact information from our system so they could do an email list or something, right? So let's go ahead and paste in an SQL statement that will get valid contact information out of our system. Ad's pasted in company.company, and then the contact's first name, their last name, and the email address. We'll go ahead and execute this query. 4D responds with what you'd expect. Now, that works fine if you want all that boundary problem and the security concern. So let's instead move this into 4D. So Ad will just copy that whole SQL block, go over to 4D. Here's the begin SQL query. He's already typed the definition of what fields it's going to be. And what I want to bring your attention to is line 3. You'll see that he has contacts for Cosmo as the name of this view. I'm dealing with the hotel Cosmo. I'm making contacts, so I'm going to name it something for them. So now we'll just run this in 4D.
This is going to take a while, right?
No, it actually is just a really quick definition that's now in the SQL engine. So now when you ask for that contacts for Cosmo, you will get that kind of like a table very quickly in the SQL server. So let's switch back over the query and see what it looks like. So now we'll just get rid of all this. We'll do select star from contacts from Cosmo, which is what we named the view. Now we'll go ahead and run this query against our system.
Yep.
And you get the values you'd expect.
Same data. Completely transparent to the user.
Yes. Now, and of course, it's still SQL, and it's through ODBC. So let's go ahead. I just realized that the Cosmopolitan Hotel is in Nevada, the state of Nevada in the United States. And I don't really want to give them all my contact information. I just want to give them the companies that have contacts that are in Nevada. So let's go back to 4D. We're not talking to the Cosmopolitan Hotel. We didn't have to do anything with them, right? The client doesn't have to change. Go back to here. All we have to do is add a, what do you call it?
Constraint.
A constraint to the where clause. The constraint we're going to do is company.state and then matching Nevada, which is NV. We'll
now
run this.
How do we update that view?
Simply run it in 4D. The view's now updated. So now the client, being told nothing, runs their query again. We'll go back over and run it in the query editor. Transparent to them, it's updated. So that is column level control, right? We decided which columns we're going to give them, and row level control. Now, what's really interesting is right here, it's still SQL, right? So they can do things too.
The view is a table. From the outside user's perspective, the view is nothing more than another table. So in fact, within the query editor, Microsoft Query Editor, they can modify this query. We can add a constraint to this query. So let's say this user only wants the contacts for the Schick and Wesley company, which is the first result there. So we'll just add a constraint where company is like, and I won't make Ad type out the whole name. We'll use the wildcard, Schick.
Great.
And we'll run it. Then we get one row.
And that, of course, allows the querying system that uses ODBC to do the same type of stuff it knows how to do already, SQL. Let's switch back to slides. So that's SQL Views, demoed and explained. We created SQL Views really to deal with the security and to be able to be compliant with regulations. In the United States, we have this regulation which, for database administrators, is painful. It's called HIPAA. It's a medical regulation by the US. These kind of regulations exist all over the place. And what you really need to have control over is column and row level access. This means you cannot, to be compliant with that, you have to be able to strict the data from your system in very clear ways. This allows you now, with SQL Views, to be compliant with this type of regulation. Additionally, we have an amazing new feature that enhances what you're already doing, and that is support for reporting tools, right? Like Crystal Reports and Dynamics GP, or what is it, Great Plains?
Used to be called Great Plains.
Yeah. These reporting features use ODBC to connect to the database. Well, now you can take the complexity of the query that you need to set up and make it a very simple statement, even if it's multiple tables across. These tools now can pull the data from it, and they can still use the SQL that they're used to using to limit it and change it. Very flexible, very convenient. And there's actually one more piece,
I'm
right?
glad
Yeah.
you said that last word, convenient. There's an interesting idea that comes out of SQL Views, I think. Number one, because they are effectively a table, you can access them from within 4D. They're not limited to external access. You can write SQL code inside of 4D to deal with a view. You said convenience. It's interesting that what I've seen some 4D developers do, and there's one in particular in the US that we talked about this idea. You build denormalized interfaces for users that are not necessarily database developers or database administrators. They may not understand how a join works. They may not understand how to do a relation. And so a query editor with relations can be quite baffling to that kind of user. You can build an interface using views where you denormalize everything for them. You give them access to only the columns that they care about, and build a very convenient user-oriented interface instead of a sort of a developer-oriented interface. So it's a nice idea. As I said, there's a developer in the US that's very excited about it, and he even gave a presentation about it in Las Vegas. So definitely something worth looking into, I think.
So that is SQL Views. Now,